Today's episode is brought to you by Anonymous.
It's high noon.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to High Noon Podcast, the competitive Overwatch podcast. I'm your host, The Blevins. With me, as always, is Deathblow. What's up, buddy?
Not too much, man. How you doing?
I am doing well, doing great. We've got a show, and we've got a long one. These team review episodes have been great. We've been getting a lot of positive feedback. I've been enjoying them. It's getting us in the spirit of the season as we are now, as of the day of this recording, 31 days, exactly one long month away from the beginning of Overwatch League. So mark it on your calendars if you haven't already. Take your Valentine's Day date, push it a day either before or after, because Overwatch League starts on Valentine's Day, which is very unfortunate for a lot of people, but it's okay. Valentine's Day comes on February 13th this year. The real holiday starts on February 14th. That's the beginning of Overwatch League. One of those things can be delayed and negotiated. The other is set in stone by companies worth multiple billions of dollars.
But good to know you'll be single soon. If you think Valentine's Day can be negotiated, it's good to know your relationship will be short-lived as we rapidly approach February.
That's a problem for future Blevins to deal with. But let's jump right in and talk a little bit about the High Noon family and what they've been doing. Of course, Blackwatch Report, keeping it real as always. Another 2-for-week, a double-up episode. They had co-hosts, Boopasaurus and Ham Tornado, talking about contenders. Check that one out. And they also had an interview with Made from Second Wind. So definitely check out, if you haven't already, check out the feed, Blackwatch Report. They have their own feed. They have their own Twitter, all that good stuff. Make sure you check them out if you are at all, even a little bit. And even if you're not, just go check them out anyway. Interested in the Tier 2, Tier 3 contenders and other leagues. Make sure you check them out. Another bit of housekeeping news here is that the power ranking contest, the High Noon Podcast power ranking contest, is officially back. So it's by popular demand, it is back. We are all the details and whatnot are in the announcements section on the podcast Discord. Make sure you check that out. The link to the Discord is going to be in the description. Make sure you check that out and join. All the details are in that post, and then you can just go into the Power Rankings Contest text channel, post your entries there, and there are prizes. So make sure to check all that stuff out. If you have any questions, let us know. So also in the housekeeping world of things, we have a new patron. Hype! We've got AJ. Thank you so much for the patron at the $3 level. Really do appreciate it, guys. Remember, if you do want to support us financially, you always can over patreon.com/highnoonpodcast. It is a great way to help us get out to BlizzCon, to help us get to Overwatch League Grand Finals. And I've got a couple other trips planned in the... Another couple of trips planned out during the season that I'm not ready to announce yet, but the early broodings of appearances are starting to pop up. So any and all funds from Patreon really do help us get out to that stuff, and then obviously pick up equipment and whatnot as well. So. Without further ado, let's jump in and talk about what we did last week. I will start here because mine's short and sweet and simple. I've just been playing a ton of Smash Bros. Just a lot.
I've been the
Smash
other
Bros.
Player in the same arena/server as the Blevins, also playing Smash Bros.
Yeah.
Curiously, you'd think with how much Smash Bros. We've been playing, either of us would have a main character picked out by now, but we certainly don't.
I don't, but I do have
a
a giant sheet and a Trello board dedicated to me figuring out to pick one.
Here's mine. Crossouts, highlights.
Oh my
notes,
God, you were making fun of me
notes.
for having a digital document. You got a piece of paper and
I wrote stuff down. I got paid good money to do that at work today.
Me too. I mean, I was definitely working the entire of the time I was on the clock, Mr. Employer.
I certainly copy pasted something for 30 seconds too, so it's not like I got paid actually good money for it. But nonetheless, yeah, I've been having a lot of fun with that. We've been joking around and goofing around with people in Discords and Twitter about it as well. Yeah. So if you guys do play, we're not world beaters or by any means. So hit us up, let us know. We'll play games with anybody. And yeah, so I think both tweeted out our friend codes at this point.
Oh no, I didn't, but I'm going to. Because I don't think there's a way for me to check it unless I'm in front of my Switch, and I didn't have my Switch today, or else I would have.
Right. So yeah, if you're a Smash player, want to hang out with us, play some games, let us know. Always looking for some people to join up and play.
Yeah, I went to a Smash Bros. Tournament for the first time in 10 years. I got destroyed.
Right.
Well, the first round I got absolutely dominated. Like wasn't close. Like completely outclassed. And the second round I played, I lost a close one. In the first game. The second game, he counter-picked what I originally picked. So he changed up, and then I changed based on that, and I almost three-stocked him. And then the third game, he went back to what he originally beat me with and beat me again. But it was close. So, like, it was a glimmer of hope that I needed to not just be like, well, let's wrap this one up, boys. I'm done.
Next game. Yeah, good. It was good validation for my decision not to go.
It was fun.
You are significantly better than me. It would have been nice to like see the event, the event a little bit and hang out. But at the end of the day, I think I would have been like ready to walk out the door, 45 minutes after walking in the door. But my game's got a lot of work before I'm ready to go to tournaments.
Same, but it was fun nonetheless. But let's move in here and nope, don't press that button, stupid. Let's talk about news. Oh man, that might be the first time that the sound button has worked. The first time I pressed it in a very long time. Got a little bit of news here, but really, man, we were talking about this before. Not much happened this week. Everyone is in scrim mode again. 1 month before the Overwatch League starts, so all the pro players are getting their scrim time in. They're getting back in LA, all that good stuff.
We're at the point where no news is good news from these teams.
Right.
Right. If they're signing somebody, that means there's probably like a glaring hole that they're noticing as they're scrimming, something
or
they
someone
can't
quit
do.
Or
right. So, that's good. Hopefully the news section stays pretty bare. We'll probably get some logistical announcements as the league gets very, very close, 1 or 2 weeks out. One thing I do want to say, if you guys are really missing watching some of your favorite players play, you can go and check out. They did some PTR scrims in a Pro Pug style on Jane's stream, which was very, very cool. Nate Nanzer actually was there for some of that broadcast talking with Jane. They did cover some things, and there was one piece of news there that came out of that we don't have in the notes. This was not definitively stated, but no preseason this year. In lieu of a preseason, we're going to be getting what's called a community countdown, and I think we're going to be seeing game modes similar to the All-Star game style of thing. They were talking about and again, none of this is confirmed, the format, none of it, we have no idea. But we do know there's going to be some form of official broadcast on the Overwatch League Twitch prior to the season, a couple days before, not a week before, anything like that. So we start on a Thursday, so maybe it'll be like Monday or Tuesday that week. Okay. We get something like that. It won't be the teams all playing or anything like that. He basically said that was a function of like the broadcast team needed it, not the teams needed it last year. So we're not going to be seeing anything like we saw last year as far as a preseason goes. I'm personally not super pleased about that.
Yeah.
I think it's a great just primer for the season. It's a great way for you to see some of the players that maybe got signed that won't get regular stage time.
Yeah.
And kind of give you a chance to see them in action and just give you some idea of what they have mechanically other than watching, their streams or something like that. So hopefully we get that back in the future years. I just want to put that on record that I really a fun community event to start the season could be part of the preseason, like a halfway between the matches kind of a thing. Bring in a widow duel, or each day do kind of a fun event in the middle of it. But I think it's important to let all the teams play at least one match against another opponent. Use everybody like you did last time, sort of thing. I think that would be a positive. And if nothing else, it's more content you guys get to make, right? It's like an easy thing that the league gets to put out, where it's just drawing in viewers and advertisers and things like that. Like you can have a preseason sponsor if you want it. I don't know how hotly that would be bid for or what have you, but there's options. There's things you can do with it. I hope to see it come back. But if you were expecting it or hoping for it, doesn't look like we're going to get it this time around. But there will be something, just not the same.
Yeah, I almost like I on the one hand, I get it from the, they kind of want to, they're taking player burnout, I guess, really seriously, which kind of makes sense. They don't want to have like an extra week of games, but also like they're not real games. You're playing your whole team.
You're not doing VOD review for them. You're just doing your regular scrim schedule, and it should be a regular scrim almost.
Yeah, I think if they're going to do essentially what they did for the All-Star game, I almost wish that they wouldn't do anything. I don't want, if you're going to give the players more time, off, air quotes, just give them the time off. Don't, make them do widow training. How seriously, if they let's just say they do the exact same format or something very similar to the Overwatch or to the All-Star game, who's going to be trying it all for that for any reason, and who's going to care about that for any reason? It means actual nothing. It's not even a nice, I don't know, after dinner mint of the entire Overwatch League. It's just we're going to build up the hype for a fake event and then start the, I don't know. It seems a little weird. It seems out of place almost. And maybe if they did other stuff, maybe the community event is the community members. They've been bringing on a lot of streamers and bringing them into the studio and doing stuff for that. Maybe they'll do something it's the Overwatch League opening week, where the matches start on Thursday and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday are different. I don't know. Maybe they've got a really long Watch Point episode. Maybe they've got some stuff and some studio stuff. Maybe they have some pre-recorded stuff. Remember the Puppy Bowl, the Overwatch League Puppy Bowl? Maybe they have something like that. Something that just gets everyone in the spirit of Overwatch League and getting ready for it, but don't involve the players in that. I want the main event to be doing the main event stuff. I don't want I don't want to see my opening act and then have the main event guitar player come out and do a solo. That's lame. Just save them, build up the hype maximally. Don't trickle it out and have it just be a slow diffusion of hype. I think that isn't that like entertainment 101. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. Again, none of this is confirmed, so we could just be, splitting hairs over nothing.
The only thing I know for sure is that Nate was adamant that Jane stop calling it a preseason and refer to it as a community countdown. Yeah. So it's, we know it's not going to be your traditional what we had last year.
Yeah. So we will we'll see, I guess. But another piece of news here is that Swoosh is now the former main tank for the Florida Mayhem is now the new head coach. So I guess that's a good thing, maybe. Good thing for him. He's got a job.
I thought he was the head coach of Gigante. I didn't think it was Florida Mayhem. Did you get that right?
I thought I remembered seeing it for Florida Mayhem. Maybe I'm just wrong. Well, while you double check that, I'll talk about.
I think he's coaching for Team Gigante. So good to see he found a home, but it doesn't look like it's in Overwatch League for now. Looks like some bad. Looks like you got some bad intel there at some point, but.
Yeah, I remember seeing a tweet somewhere, but okay. Was just wrong, but Swoosh is still okay. Woojin confirms Gigante. Okay, makes sense. I probably just missaw it. Well, I'm reporting fake news, but at least I'm admitting it and correcting it on the spot. Swoosh, head coach for Gigante, which is good for him. He's got a job in esports, which is good, and we don't necessarily see for everyone that.
It's better than we got.
True. Well, is it not? Speaking of tier 2 scene and maybe it not being a better job than we have, That was an awkward transition, but maybe it's true. A little bit of drama around NYXL2 and their contenders roster, the academy team, how they're running it.
Drama in Overwatch, Blevins? I don't think it doesn't. They just don't get along, you know. It's like
especially tier 2. That's one of the most untainted places.
Right, it's just so stable, and everybody's so content all the time.
And everyone is exactly the person that they represent themselves as when they're playing. We don't even talk about. There's more drama that we don't talk about than what happens. But NYXL2 basically has gutted their roster, and according to, oh no, I'm not gonna be able to find I closed it, but basically, in essence, their new player essentially application requires you to be in the tri-state area and to have hit top 500 or GM, I believe, in the last 3 seasons. So basically, taking their team, which was comprised of a laundry list of players, including a Clone Man who is a New York native, but a number of other players. Obviously, we had Nene on the team, Mangachu from the Canada area, among other players that weren't from that area. And they're basically, Logix also was on that team for a brief stint too, basically making this regional restriction for the academy team. And I know there's been a lot of controversy and talk about this for a number of reasons. Death, I know you have a hot take on this one, but I'm gonna start here just because I
mine
it's just
counters
so
yours
weird.
better than the other way around.
Right,
I think, yeah.
Right. Mine's not. I'm not trying to counter anything either. I'm just like, this just seems like a really weird thing to do. Because not for the health of the tier 2 scene, not for the health of contenders, not for the health of the team even. It's just like, if I'm just looking at the highest level of, like, my academy team is what is feeding into my Overwatch League team, right? Like, I want to be developing talent to go from the academy team to my Overwatch League team, to be able to have two-way contracts potentially that can play on either team, call them up when I need them, or just have them on the team to get picked up next season or traded away or what have you. This just kind of seems really weird to do this regional thing because you're not giving yourself the best chance to have the best players. You're limiting yourself for no reason other than you want to have New York or tri-state players. You want to have local players essentially on your team, and like, I'm just trying to think of this from like a traditional sports perspective, and like, why in the world would I ever do this if I'm the Toronto Blue Jays? The Buffalo Bisons don't need to be from Toronto. They don't need to be from Buffalo. They don't need to be from New York. They can be from wherever they come from because I don't care as long as they're the best players and I have a direct line to call them up to the majors when I need them. Why in the world would I ever want to region lock them? I don't get it at all from the organization standpoint, other than the like weird backlash of people being like, oh, well, how could you be a New York team? Your whole team's Koreans. It's like, are we not over that yet? And then they overcorrected it. I just don't, I don't get it at all.
Sure. To kind of answer for them a little bit, I don't personally, my opinion here isn't that I like the decision or that I think it was smart. We'll get more into my opinion on it after this, but it's basically, so some amount of region locking is being forced on these teams for the next follow-up season of contenders, right? So they do have a minimum requirement of players from the region, as in now if they're playing in NA contenders, that means have NA players. That doesn't mean have New York based players.
Right.
That just means have North American based players. And some of the guys they let go were North American based players. So notably that's a little weird, right? And just perspective, where if you're trying to, so it's not a matter of them trying to comply with this, right? Like I think they might have already been complying with it, but so some amount of this I think was being forced on them anyways, and kind of pushed them towards this mindset. And it's that in and of itself is unprecedented in sports, because you're 100% right, Blevins. And we've been talking about this for a while. The idea of region locking in esports is stupid. I see no merit to it whatsoever, and I'm sorry if you hold an opposite opinion to this. And it's not personal. I'm sure you have valid opinions, but we just need to.
Valid is a really strong word.
In some argument, maybe not this one.
I'm sure you, as a person, hold valid arguments in some cases.
Somewhere in some realm, but not this one. But so I'm not trying to alienate anybody with this, but it's just the idea of it from a business perspective of I'm running a sports team and I want to win is stupid. Why would I not bring in the best possible talent? Why would I care about something as superficial as where their address is when they grew up? That just doesn't matter to me. If I'm running a football team, a hockey team, any sport, anywhere, including esports, I just don't care where you come from. If you're better than what I have, I want you on my team. So that's already being forced here to some extent. But what I don't think, and I like the way you worded it, and you're not wrong. It is weird, but it's not weird in the sense that, like, listen, sports teams make stupid decisions all the time. They hire and fire people they shouldn't. They sign players and cut players they shouldn't. Every day in every league, it happens constantly. And this is, to me, just that. And the part where this argument gets lost on me, and where I think it goes too far and just becomes a waste of time and just more /r/competitive Overwatch whining that I don't want to see, is when we start talking about, is tier 2 in trouble, or what does this mean, or why this is bad for the scene, or no, it's not. It just doesn't matter, even in the slightest. You know what tier 2 is always going to have, Blevins? Good teams. You know what tier 2 is always going to have? Bad teams. And if NYXL wants to sign up their academy team to be on the bad team section of that argument, what do I care? I just don't. And unless you're an XL2 fan specifically, that's the only thing that should matter. You should just be like, good, idiots, now my team's going to sign Mangachu, and we're going to crush you next year, and we're going to take your spot, and blah, 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 blah. Now, the ways this gets murky is, we know that the academy teams are subject to relegation, right? But we also know that they all got their spots locked up this season because a bunch of them just got added. Now, NA Contenders is a bit of a different animal than the rest of them, because it's almost all contenders teams. It's almost all academy teams, I should say. Contenders in all regions is all contenders teams. That's how this works. But yeah, it's almost all academy teams here, so it is a little bit different. But to me, there's just nothing at all for the tier 2 fan to worry about with the scene. As long as they're subject to relegation, and we have no reason to think that they're not, because we asked Nate Nanzer point blank when he told us about the academy teams when we interviewed him, are they going to be subject to relegation? And he very pointedly said, yes. That was his answer. One word, yes. So I'm just taking them at their face value unless something changes. I get guaranteeing them going into a season with 8 expansion teams and them adding their teams into the mix. I understood that, as long as that's not a regular basis. And let's be honest, we're not going to see 8 expansion teams added at one time ever again, I don't think. So
maybe
I'd
one
be very,
more
very
season,
surprised.
maybe next season ever would be the last time ever possible, but I doubt it.
Yeah, and in that, it's going to be so hard to get 8 cities that have venues lined up and ready to go, and all these things for what the plans are. So it's just not a problem that I think is actually a long-term future problem. And it certainly doesn't mean anything bad about the tier 2 scene. Like we said, the players are all going to get signed anyways. The ones that were let go, Logix, Mangachu, they're too good not to be signed. Somebody's going to pick them up. They're going to play. And there's just... there's going to be more expansion teams next year. There's going to be players cut from Overwatch League. There's going to be room made for contenders players to move in. I'm not worried about spots for these guys to be able to showcase their talent. These aren't the 3 players that were going to be affected by that particular issue, right? And also, Blevins, we've been to enough of the 5 Deadly Venoms, NYXL fan meetups and things like that. Thinking about the rave we went to at the grand finals or whatever that was, that room had their players, their people, their New York best Overwatch players in that room. they don't play for anybody, and the whole room was watching them play whatever side event thing they were doing and watching them compete against each other and play against each other. I can't even imagine how hyped up the Waypoint Cafe or whatever, wherever they hold their meetups will be for XL2 games if guys that were last season at their season 1 meetups are on the stage playing in those games. They're going to get super hyped. So I think bringing in these New York locals might seem stupid to us, but I think after meeting that crowd and hanging out in that crowd for a little while, they're going to love it. So maybe, just maybe, they have a better pulse. You know, they have their fingers on the pulse of their own fan base better than we do. And the only other thing I want to say about this is it's not a surprise to me that the team that signed Jonak to their Overwatch League contract straight out of ladder and won the MVP award with them thinks they can still be competitive with a bunch of ladder players coming in out of New York City. That's the one team that would be more inclined to think that than everybody else. So I don't think I think they legitimately probably just think they can still be good by substituting those players, those players out, bringing in locals in. I think they're wrong. I'm with you guys there. Everybody's pretty much in lockstep agreement that this is not smart from an organization standpoint, but from a tier 2 scene standpoint, just calm down. If you guys want people to watch contenders, just make it a fun place to be and hang out and to be a fan of, instead of making everything about the end of the scene and why it's all going to come crashing down and all these things. Not every bit of news has to be about that. And I think that is almost hurting the scene more than anything else is, because it keeps me from wanting to watch it a little bit. That and they refuse to play on live patches, but that's another conversation. So
I may have been convinced a little bit of this in thinking about it in a different way. When I look at AAA baseball, right, who goes to those games? Diehard baseball fans, people who are walking down the street and see, hey, there's a baseball game going, I'm going to do this. Those are outliers or what have you. But people who want to actively and are fans of AAA baseball, usually there's some sort of gimmick or something weird or wacky about the team. Now, they still have the, usually with the branding or something. I'm thinking of the
Rochester Plates.
Well, the Rochester Plates, but the oh man, the Iron Pigs from somewhere in Pennsylvania, I forget. But they go and they do wacky things, and their mascot is literally an iron-plated hog, and most people, if you're a casual baseball fan, you're probably not watching a lot of AAA baseball unless you're literally in the city that the team is playing. That's just how it works. I live a few blocks away from the Buffalo Bisons, and when I go to those games, there's, I don't know, a 64th of the ballpark filled on most games, unless it's a specific game where there's a major league prospect playing or something that people come to go see. It's not about from the position of we want to do this for the XL2 team specifically. I can see it. You've got a gimmick. You've got your local fan base. If they're trying to basically have XL2 be its own semi-brand, obviously spinning off of NYXL and having it be very local focused, okay, that kind of makes sense. And then you just have if there's actual good players, you bring them up to Overwatch League, and if they're not, maybe they're just forever contenders players, and they're NYXL doesn't need to have an academy team from we need to produce talent because we're just going to pick it up from wherever anyway. You made a really good point in the pre-show when we were kind of talking about this a little bit, is the argument of oh, well, this team did this and they made X couple $1,000s off this player's contract selling it to this. They don't care. The team, the organization that owns the New York Mets does not care about making any number of thousands of dollars from a player contract. They couldn't care less. Actual nothing compared to that. So the money is useless. Just make your own. If they want to make their own side product, essentially, of we're gonna have a homegrown New York City team and this is New York City's team. Okay. I actually get it wholeheartedly now. That makes a lot of sense to me. Is it the best decision for the organization in terms of NYXL producing the best talent for themselves? Probably not. But do they need to get their players from the academy team? Probably not. And there's
The last thing I want to add into it is we had a very similar situation here in Buffalo with our football team last year. Now, they weren't signing locals, right? But right before the season started, they traded away a couple of first-round picks, like players that they took very highly in the draft, were very highly thought of in this organization. But the current regime, the general manager, the coach, didn't draft them. They didn't want them. They traded them out. And everybody said, "Oh my God, they're tanking. They're throwing the season away to just try to get the number 1 pick in the draft. They want to lose every single game." And you know what? Looking at it, I completely agreed with those people. Like, I thought that's exactly what the Bills were doing. We broke an 18-year playoff drought last year. So just because you think the team's going to be worse at the end result of it, if you've watched any amount of sports whatsoever, like, have the conviction when you talk about it and all those things, but just know that you can't sit here and say it's not going to work definitively. You don't know. We don't even. Right. They haven't even signed him yet. We don't even know who it is that's joining in. Maybe they run the tryouts, get a look at the talent pool, and go, "Man, what was Mangachu's phone number again?" Like, they couldn't still do that. We don't know. I don't think they'll get Mangachu. They would go get somebody that they haven't had in the organization before, or what have you. But they remember to take a step back. Things in sports aren't solved, right? If it was, the NYXL would have cruised through the playoffs and dominated, like I was laughed at in Discord when I suggested that they might not win the whole thing. Literally laughed at, told I was crazy. And when they did lose in the playoffs, people came back into the Discord server to be like, "Hey, Death, just wanted to say good call on that one." Like, no,
I was not saying that. I was saying bad call. Don't ever talk to my team or my son ever again.
You were avoiding Discord at that point.
I uninstalled it for quite some time.
right around like halfway through map 4, the Discord just disappeared. But yeah, so like, just take a step back for a second and realize things don't have to be the scene is dying. The team can't, it can't work. It's not. It's they screwed it up. Yeah, they probably did, but like, we don't know. They didn't sign him yet. Let them play, and then when it does blow up in their face, make fun of them and ridicule them mercilessly. That's the way sports works. Yeah, at least to me, I'd rather make fun of teams that screwed up after I know they screwed up. And I'll just be real iffy about it until they do.
The biggest thing that when we interviewed Bare Hands originally about the NYXL roster was his biggest thing when building the team was like, you know what? New York City, it's a place of diversity. It's a place of many cultures. It's a place of plurality. It's the melting pot of the United States. One thing that New Yorkers as a whole care about and nothing else matters is putting the W on the board. If you win, no one cares where you're from. So this is almost a little bit backwards to that, but I can kind of see where they're going. But that was more than I was expecting to talk about that, but it was a good decision, or a good discussion one way or another. Let's move on.
Real quick, that discussion will be continuing on Blackwatch Report.
Yes.
I can guarantee you. Make sure you check it out.
Big point of contention there.
We don't often dip our toes into the tier 2 scene, but they always do. That's the basis of their show. So if you like that conversation, if you thought there was some good points there, bring it with you over to Blackwatch Report.
And Blackwatch Report.
They're going to go very in depth on that. I would guess at least 3/4 of an episode will probably go into that conversation now that the season's wrapped up for NA. So.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about it because it has Overwatch League implications, and it's, in a way, even if it's not a huge effect, it's still hampering the future development of NYXL as an organization and their players. But enough on that. Let's talk about some teams. We've got 4 more teams in this episode. We're going to talk about, well, let's leave it a little bit of a surprise. We're going to start off with L'Éternel de Paris. I don't know if that's what the French...
Oh, come on. I get made fun of for doing a French accent last episode, and so you just go for it?
You were just saying words with a French accent. That is maybe what the translation is.
If you have to say maybe, I don't think you can say the rest of that sentence, but we'll let you go for now.
It's a strong maybe.
I think we should both be allowed to make as terrible a French accent jokes as we want to. But let's get things started here, like you said, with the Paris Eternal. It's going to be starting things off on a bit of a negative note here, unfortunately, but it's easily the most European team in the league. They went above and beyond to make sure that both their brand and their roster represented France as much as humanly possible. And before we get into the negative side of that, which we already touched on with a bit of the region locking conversation, you know, that will undoubtedly make them hugely popular and successful in their region.
True.
Like, their fans are going to love them, and the French fans have proven at the World Cup to just be absolutely rabid and insane. So I'm really excited for that. Hopefully they succeed in that, because the French fans will make Overwatch League more fun by being a part of it. I do believe that. If for nothing else, they give me like a pincushion to throw my French jokes at. But moving on, we've got a roster of Soon, Shadowburn, Nico, GDH. I don't know if I'm supposed to pronounce that anyway. I call him Nico. Danye, Finzi, LH Cloudy, Ben Best, Hip, Cruz, and Gray. So at the main tank position, we're going to see a positional battle here between two of the solid prospects from the contender scene, Ben Best and LH Cloudy. For my money, I think personally Cloudy is the slightly more talented of the two, but Ben Best is the Frenchman, and when a team goes this far out of its way to be as French as humanly possible, I don't think you can just throw that out. So I'm going to point that out a couple times here. I will say, despite having a preference between the two of them, I don't think there's a huge skill gap or anything between Ben Best and Cloudy here. So I think the smart choice for who should start should just go to whoever works best with the team. That's something you can only get from scrims, trying them both out. So we're not going to know until they hit the stage. And I really don't have any firm grasp on it. You know, if I'm putting money on it, I would just bet on the Frenchman, because I think they want as many French players on the stage as they can possibly swing. But for the off-tank position, we've got Finzi. He's the only off tank here on the roster, so he's definitely going to start. He came over to the Paris Eternal with Soon from the LA Valiant roster last season. However, Finzi did not get on the stage. I don't even think he actually made it to LA with a work visa in time to actually participate. So LA threw a little bit of money away there, but good for Finzi. So he does remain a bit of an unknown to some people, but he was a standout player on Orglis and Hungary before signing with LA, and he was a key piece in that surprise 1-2-3 roster that came out of nowhere, Contender Season 0. So it's going to be a lot of fun to get to see him play again. The only question I have there is, did his play drop off at all? Because he's been stuck on a bench for a while, and it's just been a bit. So that's really my only question there. For DPS, I think we're going to see Soon and Shadowburn start. If you're a fan of Nico and Danye, earmuffs for a second. I just don't think they're on the same level as the other two. It's a tier conversation, and I'm not even big on Soon or Shadowburn. I'm very hyped by Shadowburn because of the highlight reel plays. He's super exciting. He has huge moments, but you know, he got benched for EQO last season for consistency and just
also amazing.
Also amazing, right? So I think Shadowburn is a huge asset for this team, but I just don't think he's on the same level as some of the other superstar, all-star players in the Overwatch League. But maybe that's just bias from watching him get benched, and maybe we don't quite remember what we have. Definitely good for some highlight reel spots, but we'll see if he's good for enough wins to make the playoffs, because that's what we don't know. So yeah, again, I think it's basically a solved decision here. There's not really just great options to replace either of those two. So if you are a Shadowburn fan, or a jilted fantasy owner of his, don't expect another EQO kind of a situation where all of a sudden he's going to go from playing every map to not playing at all. We shouldn't really have much of that going on. So going into the support line, we're going to see Cruz on main support. I drafted him in our Season 1 mock expansion team draft. I've been big on this guy for a long time. Probably my favorite signing that they made on their roster here easily. I'm really excited to see what he can do with his chance on the big stage. You might remember him from the World Cup this year. He was a standout performer on Team UK. He's got a very unique and aggressive style of Lucio play that really only comes from being a displaced Genji main who's not allowed to play his actual favorite role. So yeah, the flex support is a bit up for grabs. We've got Hip from Eagle Gaming and Gray from GGEA. They're going to compete for stage time here. Personally, I think Gray is the better player from what I've seen of them, which isn't a ton, but like with the main tank battle, Hip's the Frenchman. And if they can justify starting them, they're probably going to do it, I would guess. So if they're getting even remotely similar performances, I'm going to actually expect to see Hip out there. But I think I personally want to see Gray if this team's going to succeed. So all things considered, this is an all right roster. You can tell all right isn't really a very high praise.
No.
I don't think this isn't like a Shanghai situation. They're not going to be, it's not even going to be like Dallas or like early stage San Francisco where they're just being outclassed by some of the mid-table teams. But I cannot envision this team anywhere near the top of the standings. I don't see them as a playoff team.
Nope.
I think the absolute best case scenario for them is the playing in wild card round situation where they can try to sneak in that way. I just don't see it. Personally, I don't think there's enough star power here to be able to bully people around, have a map differential that's going to be good enough to win a tiebreaker, to make it in. I don't expect a stage playoffs from them. I don't expect a season playoffs from them. I'm predicting 8-20 for the Paris Eternal this year.
This team feels a lot like a mid to upper tier old style Contenders team, like in the mix of doing all right in like an old format Contenders.
Yeah, I think they'd be very good there, just because like the DPS would be absolute standout studs on at the Contenders level.
This seems like a really good academy team.
Yeah, I just don't think that's what they are here. Listen, and to their credit, a phenomenal coaching staff for the Paris Eternal. I love what they've put together from a coaching staff perspective. We're not going to go into details on it. They're just very well thought of coaches brought in from winning European organizations. So I really like what they've been able to do there.
And Kai.
If they succeed, if they succeed, it's off the back of the quality of coaching, the preparation. Think what maybe the Valiant were able to do, if you're okay with that analogy and not a big Valiant fan and think I just insulted them. But they're a team that could, if they're going to succeed, do it off of teamwork. Maybe Houston's the better analogy, right? Like I think that's the Houston season last season, where they just missed the playoffs but look pretty good at times, have metas, stuff like that. Feels like the high water mark for this team, like the absolute best that we can expect from them. But hey, a lot of these guys, like we said before, some of the guys that get called up are surprise successes. They were mid-tier Contenders players, but for whatever reason, in this environment, they were going to really flourish and succeed. If a couple of those are here, maybe we're wrong, but I just don't see it.
That coupled with you have Soon and possibly Shadowburn as built-in leaders for the team. They've been through the ropes. They've both, Soon more than Shadowburn, but still have seen actual stage time, can have that sort of support that some of these other expansion teams don't have. Hangzhou Spark and the Vancouver Titans don't have that. They're coming in completely fresh. Shanghai obviously has returning players as well, but like these expansion teams don't have like Soon. And even Shadowburn, to an extent, they know how to win and they know how to deal with loss on stage. And in the Overwatch League, they know how to deal with the Overwatch League and the stress of it and the living in the team house and all that stuff. They've gone through a year of it. And I stress this every time it comes up. Like, that is not going to be – it's going to be a factor to have these people in place to be like – and especially the coaching staff too. It's like, hey, guys, you can't be sleeping until 2 p.m. every day. Like, we need to do scrims. We need to do, but also like, hey, we're not scrimming 18 hours a day. Having players and coaching staff that have been through the ropes of season 1 is going to be a big factor, I think, for a team, especially an expansion team like Paris Eternal. So I agree with you. I don't see their high mark being super high at all. But I do think, at least in some cases, at least in some ways, they have a bit of an advantage on an entire season level compared to some of these other expansion teams. I don't think they're necessarily going to do better than some of these expansion teams, but I do think that they have some things they're going to
mentally cope with their losses better than some of the other teams. That
which you say is a joke, but is actually something like if Runaway comes out and gets dumpstered the first 2 weeks, they possibly fall off the rails and end up being awful, right? Like that's not out of the question. That's kind of what happened to Dallas last season. Like They had all the expectation in the world. They got rolled. It was like the turnaround. Like they lost close games in the first weeks, and then they lost to Houston, and it was like no one predicted that except maybe you, but you're a homer. No one predicted that happening, and then it just like it
when I'm right.
turned the corner in a bad way for Fuel. So I can definitely see that happening. But
definitely a big factor. The players on Dallas weren't less talented than they were in the contenders round that ended 3 months before the season started. They didn't get less talented. Cruised through that. So going to be interesting. Definitely not a team you can completely sleep on, but thankfully I don't have to worry about like being motivated to prepare to play against them. I just get to throw my bad predicted record at them and move on to the Philadelphia Fusion, who are next on our list. So they were the Cinderella story of season 1, but fell just short of a championship. Now they're returning season 2, but they've got targets on their backs this time, Blevins. They did some streamlining of their roster, but the core remains. You want to read us who they got?
Yes, I do. They have the one and only Carpe at
Winnable.
DPS. Very winnable. EQO, also at DPS. Snillo as a two-way player. Not sure. I mean, he saw a decent amount of play, I guess, for a bench player last year. DPS, they've got Poco, Nerf Poco Bomb, Poco at Flex, Fraggy at DPS, Sato, at Tank, Sato also at Tank.
All the roles wrong, so let's just stop reading roles and go.
Have I been reading it wrong?
Yeah, you've been like one line above for the role, and then you go down to the player. So you were like, at Flex, they've got Fraggy. At DPS, they've got Pogo. Like, so you've just been like, one line above.
Fraggy, Tank, Sato, Tank, Boombox, support, Neptuno, support, Elk, also on a two-way contract at support.
Sure. Yeah, like you said, with Hapa traded to Guangzhou, the path is clear for Poco, so he's not going to be leaving the stage. And personally, I think Philly will be better for it. The tank swapping didn't blow up in their face last year, clearly, as they made the finals, but I don't think it really paid off the way they envisioned it.
Kind of blew up in their face in the finals specifically because Sato looked like London really exposed the lack of communication. Like,
definitely hard to argue with that there. But, so they didn't quite get what they wanted out of it. Now it's just Poco's job. There's nobody there to even pressure him or anything like that. So we'll definitely be seeing him out there. For main tank, it's still a mystery. We have no idea what they're thinking. One thing I will say, Sato and Hotba were previously used mostly as a duo. By the end of the season, we did see some Sato and Poco out there at the same time. Listen, I don't know what the Fusion staff thinks about this situation, but personally, was never impressed with Sato very much. I talked about it a lot on the show. Was waiting for that level up that we were supposed to be getting when Fraggy came out. And Fraggy just constantly got better. Like all last season, it was just every week you could have written a little, we could have produced an hour-long show just about what Fraggy did that was better than he did the last week for a while there. His Winston was terrible at the start of the season, and then by the end, I thought he was very, very good. So it's going to be interesting to see. We know we've got Sato, who's the more conservative style of main tank. He's not going to die as often, but he's also not going to get near the number of kills that Fraggy gets. And personally, especially if Reinhardt is the main tank of the meta, it has to be Fraggy to me. I'm done with Sato. I want my bearded brethren back in the lineup. The guy who recognizes us from across the room when we walk into a big press conference with a bunch of people. That's our guy. We want to see him in there.
We're definitely biased.
Yes, we're biased, but if I try to take that bias out, I think I still get to the same spot.
Yep.
I'm a little bit less convinced, though, with Winston. Like, maybe Sato's better there. I don't know. I still lean Fraggy a little bit just for, listen, this was a very inconsistent team last year. I want to see them get consistent. And to me, swapping tanks with every single time you want Winston versus Reinhardt is going to be a problem and might exacerbate that. So I'd like to see Fraggy as the full-time starter, see where the team goes. We'll see what the Philadelphia Fusion staff wants to do, and we'll find out with a quickness once they hit the stage. So on DPS, really easy to figure out here for Philly. Thanks for that, guys, making the notes a little easier on this section. It's going to be Carpe and EQO starting. They were a hell of a tandem last year, and the only other DPS on the roster is Snillo. As Blevin said, he's got that two-way contract, and he has been with the Philly Fusion, or the Fusion Academy team all through their, no spoilers, season that happened here and just closed yesterday, the day before, very, very recently. And yeah, so he's been with them the whole time. If they were planning to rotate him in and use him regularly, he'd be with the Owl roster. He'd be scrimming, and they'd have somebody else there on the academy team.
Yeah.
So I don't expect to see him on the stage at all unless they call him up for an easy matchup. They might. Who knows how these teams are going to use the two ways in the middle of the season, but the bulk of his time is going to be spent with the academy team. Yeah. Much like the DPS, there's not a lot to figure out with the support line. Neptuno and Boombox are back. They're going to start. Boombox really, I thought, hit his stride in the playoffs and late in the season last year. Seemed to really get comfortable on stage, get back closer to that, the pop-off guy he was prior to the Overwatch League starting. Elk was added, but again, that's another two-way player who's been with the academy team the entire time. It's going to really take Neptuno struggling there in order for them to call him up. But I will say, I think Elk's ready for it if they need him. I think he could make that jump with minimal. And I'm not just saying that so that Kyle doesn't yell at me. But yeah, I think he's definitely got what it takes. He's got the mind for it. He's very in depth in his analysis and his explaining things on streams when he does VOD reviews. I've just been very impressed with him every time I've gotten the opportunity to see him play. So a great addition there, but probably not one that you'll see reflected on the stage very much. Blevins, what do we got for maps last year from the Fusion?
When I was looking at this, I'm like, man, we didn't do maps for the last team. Oh, wait, they weren't a team. Their best, for Philly, their best map type was hybrid at a 60% win rate. Notably, they had only one negative win rate, and that was Kings Row at 46%, but everything else was above 60%. Control was a 53% win rate. No real high watermark here, just kind of average around. Ilios being their lowest at 42%. Escort was exactly Escort and Assault actually both right down the middle at 50% exactly, with a staggeringly low Junkertown at 21% win rate, and then for Assault 25% for Volskaya, 35% for Horizon Lunar Colony. However, the high watermark for Philly is the 80% win rate on Temple of Anubis, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, looking at these numbers, it is a sharp reminder that this team that finished second
good
overall in
Philly,
the league,
bad Philly, good Philly, bad Philly,
old bad Philly back again. We got a song for this. It's a sharp reminder that this is a very flawed team, right? They're hype, they perform great, they have the ability to beat absolutely anybody in this league. Literally everyone. I believe they've done that. So listen there, but it's really tough, right? Like, you listen last season, we just did the song. You'll remember we were constantly all about their consistency problems. Every single map game mode here has maps below 50%, and there are 0 more than 80%. They got one right at that 80 mark, but that's it. So listen, Fusion, get this figured out for the sake of my pick'em record. I want to finish better this year. I want to do better. You guys killed me last year. They did streamline things a bit. I think that's going to help. But listen, there's no reason that a roster this talented needs to sneak into the playoffs with the lowest possible seed. So that's what they did last year. I do expect some improvements, but I expected it last year too, and they did things last year to try to fix it. Shadowburn out, EQO in, Fraggy out, Sato in. It never went away. So until I see it go away, I have to pick this to be kind of that middle of the pack team, maybe high end middle of the pack team. I don't think we're talking about a top 2, top 3 team in the standings. I don't think that's who they are. But they are absolutely a team that has the ability to win the entire league if they're playing well at the right time, and they can get back to the finals. Just show up there, and maybe play Fraggy so he can try to go toe to toe with Gesture. I don't know. I'm not the coach. You guys can figure it out when you get to the finals what you want to do. But they're a lot of fun, so I'm really excited to watch them. They were 24-16 last season. I'm gonna call them 16-12 this season. So I think I didn't check, but I think that's tied with what I put Houston at, which we thought would be kind of the bottom of the playoff teams, but not
like a play-in,
above the play-in, above the play-in. So like the bottom of the teams that aren't playing in and just have a secured spot is about where I'd put them. But yeah, it's going to be ups and downs again for Philadelphia, I would guess. Not enough has changed for me to think all their consistency problems are going to disappear.
True. That is one really good note, is that there's no additions to this team. There's kind of additions by subtraction in that we're going to have, theoretically, we're going to have some consistency because they're not going to be able to shift their roster up as much as they did before.
They pivoted their roster from like bench players they weren't using, like Joe Meister and Dayfly, to two-way players. It's a much smarter way to organize your team. I like that the roster looks way better now. It's cleaner. I'd like to see maybe a little more bench help for some of the positions, but you know, at the end of the day, we know that the six they're going to roll out there can compete with anybody, so I'm happy.
Yeah. I mean, they still have Carpe and EQO, which can go toe-to-toe with literally anyone, so
yeah. This is a playoff team, and this is a team that just needs to make it in to be a threat to everybody to win the whole thing. They proved that last year. So it might sound like we're damning them to say that the team that finished second overall after the playoffs is going to finish the bottom of the playoff standings, but like that's what they did last year too. So
don't let recency bias get to you, man. Like there are struggle weeks for them. Like that's old. We did not make a song for every team about having a bad side.
No. And so I expect that to rear its head again this year, but we'll see exactly how bad it gets, I guess.
Yeah. Speaking of how bad it gets, do you want to talk? Although not
how bad it gets, how bad it was.
How bad it was
is what we're going to be talking about here. San Francisco Shock is up next. Things got really interesting in San Francisco this offseason. Blevins, take a big, deep breath and read this 12-player roster.
Okay. We've got Baby Bay, Super, Sleepy, Sinatra, Nevix, Architect, Moth, Cho, Hyoi, Bin, Smurf, Rascal, they're not cowards, Vile 2T, and the one and only Striker.
Well, let's rip the Band-Aid right off and say I think they might be cowards, but actually DPS
they probably are cowards here.
My list here is DPS, so we'll actually wait a second to get into that. I want to talk first about the main tank battle on this team. I think it's easily the closest and most interesting. We've got Smurf acquired from the Houston Outlaws in exchange for Dante immediately after Houston promoted Smurf off of their academy team. It was just done to be exclusive and get Dante, basically. So it was like San Francisco paying to elevate off of Houston's academy team. I think it was a really smart move. If he pans out, they just didn't need Dante, right? Like if Smurf doesn't start for him, doesn't see the stage very much, yeah, they gave something up and didn't really get anything in return. But Dante would have been drowned on this roster. There's too many tracer players as it is. So they didn't need another one of those. So they went and got themselves a second main tank option. I think he's probably going to start, only based off of the fact they committed resources to sign him, and Super far from overperformed last year. I don't think he was a huge disappointment. I don't think he was necessarily a big liability for them, but I've never been huge on his Winston play. He was always the hammer.
Blood-soaked hammer.
Soaked in the blood of his enemies. The ZP drop that we had from back in the day.
Hog.
That was about
a good
Super.
hog, too. Decent hog, at least.
Yeah, but his signature player has always been Reinhardt. So we might have a situation similar to what we were talking about with Philly, where you got one that plays Winston, you've got another one that plays Reinhardt. Personally, I would try to see if I can get Smurf to fill both of those roles. For the off-tank position, we've got Nevix versus Choi Hyo Bin. Nevix is a flex god, and that can't be understated. He's a huge asset to the San Francisco Shock because of his flexibility. He's literally, I believe, played all 6 of the different roles at one point during his career. He's never been like a liability on any of those roles. He's just can do whatever you need him to. I think that is a huge asset for San Francisco, but I think he's still going to remain a bench player for them. Choi was a standout performer. He was a difference maker for them when they signed him, brought him in. Him and Architect came in, revamped what San Francisco looked like, brought them close to the stage finals in stage 4. There's a couple other additions we're about to get to, but I expect Choi to be a continued starter carrying over from where he left off last season. I guess we'll find out if Krusty agrees soon, but I have a hard time envisioning it going another way. For support, we do have Moth and Sleepy returning, but we also saw them sign Violet here. I think he's definitely going to be taking over for Sleepy on that flex role. We heard some grumblings when we were at the finals, when we were talking to some people about the World Cup, that maybe Sleepy's a little bit toxic, or not maybe toxic's the wrong word, but just like not the best teammate in the world as far as communications go.
Yeah.
All right, let's be honest. Toxic was exactly the right
Toxic
word.
was there was a couple
not
other
saying that's what he
words
is.
peppered
I'm saying
in
that's
as well.
what we were told he was by people in the know that we won't name. But yeah, so I think there's a want to move away from him, and I think that is only confirmed by signing Violet, who is mechanically speaking said to be able to go toe-to-toe with the absolute best Zenyatta players that Overwatch the league has to offer. That measuring stick, unfortunately, is named Jonak, so I'll believe it when I see it. I'm not saying anybody can go toe-to-toe with Jonak until I see him do it, but I do think he's going to get the start. Sleepy was a good performer, though, so that is a rock-solid fallback plan, right? Sure. If he gets sick, something like that, or maybe we're just wrong and Sleepy keeps the job for the time being. We'll have to wait and see. But DPS is an embarrassment of riches at this point with this roster.
It's like NYXL level almost.
It's just as bad, really. We've got Baby Bay, Sinatra, Architect, Rascal, and of course Striker, acquired from the Boston Uprising here, all to choose from. And seriously, how are you supposed to divide the workload between 5 people? You just can't do it and get the most out of all of these players. So to me, that leaves Baby Bay on the outside looking in. That's a bench player. He's not going to see the stage. He had a really strong performance in stage 4, but they've got Striker and Architect now, so sorry.
Nowhere to put him in.
Sorry. You're just not gonna make it in. Hopefully somebody trades for you in the middle of the season, because I think you've got what it takes to, and you belong on this stage. Just I don't see how you fit in.
He's got the star power too. Like he could be like the point man for a team.
He's got the personality, the kind of like
the
I don't care. I'm just going to rub my nipple on camera, and you're going to have to watch a clip of that 500 times because it's funny. That kind of attitude, which is hysterical.
The Baby Bay challenge.
Shout outs for the Baby Bay challenge. I think that was great to do. But it's going to be rough to see him get out there. Oddly enough, I think very similar, and there's at least one person in Discord who just hates Sinatra who's going to love that I'm saying this. I think Sinatra is going to really struggle to see the stage too. He's making a lot of money for somebody that's not going to see the stage, but they have Striker more money now. Right. And I just think Striker is just too good to put on the bench. So if you're asking me between Striker and Sinatra, it's Striker 100 times out of 100.
Not close.
Unless it's Doomfist or Reinhardt that I need my Tracer player to be able to flex over and play, then I want Sinatra, because I've never seen Striker do that. But otherwise, I think Striker is just the best in the league at that role. So unless it's not
close, at least.
At Tracer, significantly better than Sabayola, but you don't even care. Don't at me. But yes, so
SBB.
Sinatra's likely to be relegated to mostly on the bench. If it's not Tracer, then things might open up for him. But with so many options, it might not be Sinatra. It's really going to depend on what the hero is. The other side of things, we've got Architect and Rascal potentially for the second spot. Both of them incredibly strong projectile players. I will say Rascal's hero pool is not exactly what you would call cookie cutter. It's not like I play Genji and I play right. It's like I play Mei and I'm the best Reaper in the league, and it's like great. The Reaper thing might be super relevant coming up.
True.
But, we will have to wait and see exactly how the meta plays out. I'm expecting Striker and Architect to start. I'm terrified of that as somebody that's not really a fan of San Francisco, just a fan of teams that have to go against them. So that is absolutely terrifying. Super scary. But also just play Rascal, you cowards. So they're probably going to look for spots to use Rascal and Sinatra, but I don't think they're going to start. Like I said, I'm expecting Striker and Architect. But don't forget, just play Rascal or Eureka. London kind of hampered you guys with that. Now you've got the meme, so congratulations. Blevins, talk to us about maps so that we can throw them out.
Yes, we can throw them right in the garbage. We have Escort at their best, billing at 55% win rate. And nothing really to explain there. Hybrid, this is where it starts to go down a little bit. 48% on Hybrid, with abysmal 20% win rates on Eichenwald and Hollywood. Control also 48% win rate. Nothing too out of the ordinary. Just uninspired maps there. And then Assault is their worst billing here at 41% with a measly 25% win rate on Volskaya Industries. Man, their highest win rate on any given map is 73%. most.
Yeah,
looking
looking at these numbers,
40 to
Blevins,
60.
we're looking at just a terrible Overwatch team. They just don't have a chance. They're not going to do anything. But listen, so much has changed since then.
A
Like
lot.
we're talking about map results where Nomi and Dehak were playing on this roster, and I'm not going to hamper the star-studded roster that we just read out. I'm not going to judge them on what happened that long ago. If they were returning more players into their starting roster, we would put a little more weight into it. But it's in terms of player quality, coaching, everything across the board. I think they've made drastic improvements from what even stage 2 and 3 versions of San Francisco looked like. The potential fatal flaw, the thing that can hold them back, is the main tank to me. If that doesn't drag them down into the middle and keep them from being there, I think we're talking about a team with the firepower to potentially move up into the 1, 2, 3 sections of the standings. I think they are that good. Just from a purely talent perspective, Krusty is still thought to be one of the best coaches in the league. Nothing to sneeze at there from the coaching staff. We had him at 17-23 last season, Blevins. I think all those changes, all those players, it's good for one more win. I'll give him 18 wins this year.
True. But how many
only
fewer losses.
So, 13 fewer losses I'm going to predict them for. But yeah, no, this is a team. I'm not going to predict them to be better than New York. I've said this a lot last year when predicting things about New York.
Yep.
They're at the top until they're not at the top anymore. And as far as regular season standings and records go, they don't choke in the regular season. They only chew their food or swallow their food whole in the postseason. I'm going to predict somewhere around 3 to 4 here for San Francisco. I think I like Smurf as a prospect. I think Super has a lot of room to grow as well. Hopefully Krusty can continue to level him up. That kid's so young, though. He's not 19 years old yet. He's still 18. So a lot of room for him to improve. Glad he's stuck around. They didn't cut him, but I think Smurf can bring them up a little bit more than he can. So unless I'm wrong about that, and then they're just kind of stuck a little bit lower because of their tank play, I'm expecting good things here from San Francisco.
Now, not that San Francisco is the best Season 1 team necessarily, but do you think that there is a Season 1 team that has leveled up more than San Francisco has?
Yeah. Shanghai.
You're right.
You're leveling up infinitely when you're
when you go from 0 to 1. Yeah,
right.
That's true.
So, but without, other than that massive outlier,
right?
No, probably not, because they were very solid at the end, and then they made all these huge, big deal changes. Like Violet could be an absolute game changer for them in a position that wasn't even a weakness. Really, the only position that I personally would have wanted them to see maybe replace is Moth. Moth is solid, but I'm never impressed. But it's so hard to impress from the main support position.
True.
Like, especially when it was
You're
a season
only
where
ever
he
impressed by Neptuno because he pulls out the mercy
right,
gun.
because he shows he does something. He makes plays, and he doesn't just it's not just a matter of how often did he die. From a spectator perspective, that's all you can judge from a mercy player sometimes. So, I don't want to write Moth off, but I'm also not sold there yet. His name is Moth. You'd think he would have been at his best in the Moth meta, but I do want to see him play Lucio before I just kind of completely write him off as somebody that's going to be a problem for him. I'm willing to assume that they'll get good enough main support play, and then if the tank works out, they're just going to be a very, very good team.
True. I do have pretty high hopes for San Francisco. But speaking of potentially huge improvements from last season, or at the very least big changes from last season, last team we're talking about on this episode is going to be the Seoul Dynasty.
Yes, we're going to wrap things up with probably the biggest disappointment of Season 1 in Seoul. Let's just read the roster off here, Blevins. Go ahead.
All right. We've got Zunba, Jaehong, Toby, Fleta, Munchkin, Michelle, Marvel, Jexy, Fitz, and the big ticket item, the one and only Fissure. Huge.
Yes. Okay. I was like, there's nobody after Fitz in the list, and then I read big
skipped
brain play. You
Clay.
left him off.
Yeah, I did.
You're tricksy. So yeah, both Miro and Kuki are gone. That makes room for Fissure and Marvel to come in and be the main tanks. There's no debate here. This isn't a position battle. It's Fissure's job. We know it. We know he's
not. Well, we have. Here's the thing. We have seen Seoul do arguably the weirdest and dumbest things, like not playing Fleta.
Yeah, I can't argue with that, but I've got to think common sense will prevail in the end. It did for them mid-season when they got crazy. But yeah, Fissure, we know he's one of the very best. Like no one ever was. Sorry, had to happen. For off tank, we've got Zumba. He was retained, and Michelle was signed from Lucky Future Zenith. Personally, I think of Zumba as more of your Zarya specialist, looking at you, Spree, that sort of situation with Houston. So I think Michelle's probably going to start for this team if Diva's the key off tank in the meta. We don't know as far as patches go. Diva's a hot topic for potential nerfs. She just caught one on the PTR.
Yep.
Pretty sizable one, decent. I think she's still going to be prevalent, but we will see. I've got about a 4% success rate at predicting what metas will look like after patches. So my opinion doesn't really matter too much as far as those are concerned. But I'll still give it to you if you ask. But yeah. So I'm expecting Michelle there. It could be Zumba, and I don't think it would necessarily make a huge difference, but I don't know a ton about Michelle to really judge their place. So we'll have to wait and see exactly how that position pans out. It's a little bit of an unknown for me. But supports, we've got Jaehong back. He's going to be holding down that flex support role. Anna's much more used now than she was in season 1, so I think he's going to have a much higher impact on the outcome of Seoul's games. Hopefully just overall help them to be a better team. Toby also returned, but they did sign Jexi, who was a very highly sought after and well-respected Korean prospect for main support. He was signed well after the disappointing season Toby had, so I think he's got a real shot to start for the team. It really may depend on the meta, like we were talking about with supports before. What we know about Toby from season 1, that he's not good enough to play Mercy. So maybe that's why they brought Jexi in case it's needed. Toby was lovingly referred to as the boop god because of his Lucio play prior to Overwatch League. I personally want to see him get a shot on Lucio. I'm going to be a little upset if he's riding the bench in the Lucio meta.
I feel like we saw him a little bit, and it wasn't anything. I remember thinking like he wasn't as impressive, but that also could have been a product of the rest of the team and just the organization being in shambles.
And I think, and we saw that with just about every single Poggers Lucio player we know of, right? Like Big Goose wasn't the same on Lucio because of how long he was spending learning, so their scrim hours, their grinding time, their coach work was on Mercy. And you already know how to play Lucio, so you get to do it for maybe one map, maybe. And so I don't think any of them boink. He wasn't even learning Mercy. He just didn't get to come in and like pop off like crazy. So I think better days are ahead for the Lucio mains of season 1, and I hope we get to at least see Toby get a crack at it if that is the meta main support that teams are going with. So, but definitely a roster spot to keep a close eye on because that could change mid-season. A lot could happen there. DPS is a little bit easier to get a feel for when you look at it. Fleta's not going anywhere. They traded Bunny mid-season 1, so we know Munchkin's going to start opposite him. They did sign Fitz, but he comes from relative obscurity, like ladder, I'm pretty sure. So I think we can rely on Munchkin and Fleta being the starters here for DPS.
The thing about ladder players is that like they have a higher, almost like a higher ceiling, unless they're like someone's nephew or something. Like you don't pick up a ladder player for no reason, especially when there is just a wealth of talent in the scene, especially a wealth of Korean talent that wants to play for a Korean team. There's a reason that you're picking up a ladder player over other players. So
they could have probably chosen from almost anybody they wanted that wasn't trying to like stick with their team wherever they went. I don't think one bad season soiled all the Korean talent on wanting to join this team by any stretch.
I don't think so either.
I'm pretty sure nationalism is a pretty big deal over there, like it is here. So they want to represent their country. They want to. That's the team they would choose to play for if most of them got the opportunity to pick. So yeah, clearly there's some potential there. I don't know anything about the guy's hero pool. It's like we were, but like you said, we were talking the same similar unknown thing about Jonak. prior to season 1, where what's going to happen, how good he's going to be. We have no idea.
How good he was going to be.
But in this position, there's somebody that's right there that we can kind of assume is going to play over him. Maybe they move him in, work him in as the season goes on. But for all I know, his hero pool overlaps with Flood Out. I'm definitely not going to predict he takes that job.
I mean,
talk to us about maps here for Soul Blevins.
The last thing I'll say is that's kind of what happened with EQO as well. We would not have predicted, and if we even talked about him before, we would have said, well, I'm certainly not picking him to play over Shadowburn.
Yep, you're 100% right.
Possible.
So a definite player. Maybe
keep an eye on him for sure.
Maybe your last round fantasy pick in our mock draft this week, Blevins.
Not going to be my last one. Certainly going to be earlier than that. But my first.
Great.
Yes. Let's move on here and talk about the maps. We've got for Assault, their highest win rate here, 59%. Topping out at 78 on Volskaya, and the low end, really the only bad map here was Hanamura at 36%. Escort was very close at 58%. 78% on Route 66 and 45 on Gibraltar. Control down to 52%, really right around the mid to high 50s and mid 40s% across all the maps. And then Hybrid was the worst map for them at 48%, lowest on Eichenwald at 40, and Hollywood was the high end on 60. So
yeah, so
average.
expected to be rough numbers for a team that didn't make the playoffs. They did have some comfort spots, but again, nowhere there they dominated, right? Like Houston was very close to them in the standings and had maps that they owned, and we're not seeing that here. But again, this is a little bit, it's a San Francisco light situation where enough has changed. I'm not overly concerned about this. There's not too many like awful maps where I don't think that player skill can't fix some of the map problems that they had. I will say though, I'm not as high on this team bouncing back as a lot of people are, and we're gonna feel that in the predicted record that I'm having to do the math for on the spot while I talk.
28 minus.
But we were looking at them last year. They were 22-18. Now they've picked up a tank. This is a team that had some internal indecision going on, and now they've picked up a main tank player who has it in him to bench himself for the playoffs for his team. I'm not 100% certain that he's not going to maybe create more problems than he solves. I think it's possibly like just not necessarily the right fit. I don't know enough about their coaching staff to know if they have a strong enough personality there leading the organization to rein him in and calm him down and make him realize he doesn't own the team. I think he thought he owned the Los Angeles Gladiators. Like he spent the money to buy the organization. At least that's the way he kind of acted. And that's great. And it's confidence when the team's winning. And then when you bench yourself for the playoffs, it's just like the worst look in the world for everybody involved. I don't know. This team certainly has the potential now with the main tank problem solved to be as high as they want to be in the standings. I think they can compete with New York. I think they have that capability, but I'm not sold on it, and I'm not going to predict it, and I'm going to hedge my bets, and I'm going to put them somewhere in the middle of the pack. So let's say, man, it is a really tough call.
We had 18 wins for San Francisco, 16 wins for Fusion. Are you going over or under the Fusion?
I'm a little more confident in Philadelphia's inconsistency than I am in the pieces working out for Seoul and Fissure not imploding and them not having any bad stretches because of the internal, any internal problems. I don't like predicting internal problems, but like I've also never seen a quarterback or a main tank or anybody bench themselves for a playoff match before. So I could be really overreacting to that, but I'm going to go 15-13. I'm going to put them one game behind where I put Philadelphia. I'm just a little less confident in them, but they could be playing for their way in the wild card weekend, or they might be one of the bottom teams with that record to be secured. They're definitely improved. I think even with turmoil, indecision, all that stuff going on, they'll be better than they were last year. But yeah, that's where I'll put them for now.
I definitely agree they are going to be better than last year. I also, as an NYXL fan, as a fan of anyone, like this team is, and again, our power rankings are who do we not want to play this week coming up. This is week 1. I'm not sure how this team's going to react. If I'm going off of pen and paper, what are their rankings and stats as a team and player skill, I'm scared of this team. This is a scary team with very high potential. Again, Fissure, huge. Jaehong, classic. Fleta, just stellar.
Yeah, that's a really good call. This is a team that belongs higher on power rankings than it does on predicted
record
standings. Yep. Yeah, I think that's 100% correct.
This is a huge example of the difference there. So I'm putting them pretty high up in my power rankings for this week specifically, but in terms of predicted record, I think I'm a little bit closer to where you are. Man, we really could see Fissure end up being almost like a Janus situation with NYXL, where like Janus, really talented tank player, does not fit how that team plays. It's possible, like you have almost like you've got Fissure, you've got Jaehong, you've got Fleta as like almost like the Triforce of this team. Where does this perfect like triangle fuse together and make it an omnipotent, powerful force, or do they pull and detract from each other and tear away at each other? I don't know. But I think they're they are a very exciting team to watch for this season. They're not just riding off their coattails of being successful in contenders. You know, they have something to prove. They have the raw talent. They failed in a lot of by a lot of metrics last season. So I think one of the more interesting story arcs is going to be the Seoul Dynasty story arc for this season. So even though I'm not an active fan of Dynasty, I think they're going to be one of the more interesting teams to cover, at least going into it. So, yeah.
Can't argue there. I will give them credit, too. It seems like they recognize that possibility. Like, Marvel was signed.
Yeah.
They could have easily gone, we've got Fissure, we're all set.
Right.
He's the most handsome anyways, we're not going to bench him.
Right.
And just not sign anybody else, but
we're not going to bench him. But is he going to bench him?
He's going to bench himself for Jaehong to main tank.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, they brought Marvel in, and I think they might think that is at least, and there's an outside chance that something like that could happen, and they're a little bit prepared for it here. So props to them for that. Should really help them with any stability problems. You know, sometimes a player like Fissure, you bench him for a week, right? You say no.
Put him in timeout.
No. Oh yeah, like nice hissy fit and scrims. We're bringing Marvel in now, and then you win those 2 games, and you put Fissure in his place, and and maybe this team doesn't revolve around me, and maybe I can be a supporting cast and a game plan, and something along those lines.
Or like Marvel pops off and becomes the EQO of Seoul, and we don't see like Fissure is going to be on I don't know, the Hangzhou Spark next like mid-season. Like who knows? You know,
could be. He could just bounce around. He could be Overwatch League's Pluppy of closed beta, where every week he's playing for a different team.
Yep.
Yeah, just filling in.
He's
not
real life. He's real life Winston. He's just every time his shift is up, he's jumping to another team and wreaking havoc. But that's gonna be it for this episode, guys. We're making our way through. I think we've got one. We have one more
of these. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So there is just 4 expansion teams left. That is the Shanghai Dragons.
Don't add us.
The Washington Justice. My alphabet's failing me at the moment.
Hangzhou. No, we talked about.
No,
Spark.
we already did that.
The not Grizzlies, Titans.
Vancouver Titans and the Toronto Defiant are the other 2. So just those to wrap up. 1 returning, kind of, and then 3 expansions to go.
3.5 expansion teams.
Then after that, we're looking at power rankings. We're looking at a meta discussion. And if there's anything else you want to see, there's one more Flex episode out there. So if you've got anything in particular you want to see before the season kicks off, actually, that's going to probably just have to be Stage 1 preview. Or, Season 1 preview. Week 1, not even stage or season. Week 1.
Ooh,
we're gonna have
is
to
that going to be
matchups.
right? Is that going to be right at episode 150?
I don't know. We'll have to figure it out.
I think it might
They
be.
like to help us out with these milestones, I think.
Yes. Well, think about that. What you want us to either do for episode 150 or week 1 or what have you. We've got a couple of the episodes planned out. We have one-ish flex episode. So let us know what you want to see, and we will work for that. But that is going to be it, guys. Unless, is there anything last minute we need to...
No, I'm already finding my Switch Pro controller.
Oh, okay. That's going to be it, guys. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Let us know what you thought. Yes, pick your stupid dog and go fishing.
I'm fishing. Fishing.
But guys, you can always support us like AJ did over at patreon.com/High Noon Podcast. That is super helpful for us. You can also make sure we do this live every Monday, 7 Eastern at twitch.tv/High Noon Podcast. Throw us a follow. Throw us. We had a number of resubs here and a gifted sub. So huge shout outs to everyone who's been supporting us there. Everything helps. Just coming in and chatting and asking questions and hanging out is always super helpful for us. So again, twitch.tv/High Noon Podcast. And you can follow pretty much every social media platform. We are High Noon Podcast. But that is going to be it, guys. For Deathblow, I'm the Blevins. And remember, it's High Noon.
Got his boots and he put on his hat. He threw the coin away that same day. It's in his past and he's not looking back. He says, finding mine now, God's my way. He's not good, but he sure ain't bad. He'll make amends for the sins that he has. He says, I'll change the world one bullet at a time till I find mine.
Oh, we already lost Deathblow. He's already gone. Oh God, he died. Okay.